Welcome back to our Midlife Murmuration. Today's guest is Julian Burnett, a creator, leader, investor and mentor whose career has shaped some of the most defining transformations in business and technology. In this episode, our murmurings explore midlife as a crescendo, the art of living legacy, being parented and parenting, and the gentle wisdom of letting go. The conversation is warm and the insights are earthy, and Julian's reflections invite us to float rather than drive. We hope you enjoy listening, and as always, feel free to add your thoughts to the murmuration. Let's begin. Today's guest is someone I've known for many years, first as a client, then as a partner, and now as a friend. Julian, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah. Hi, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm Julian Burnett. As Chris says, we go back away. I go back away. In fact, my career at last tally amounts to about 35 years. Latterly, leading my own small advisory and investing business, but I've held a range of fairly significant corporate positions, all largely involved in digital and technology-enabled business transformation for some big brands.
Very good. And we'll dig into some of those and the story that weaves through it, I'm sure, in this conversation. But let's start with the question, what does midlife mean to you?
Well, I think as a father, and I think for many parents, it arrives quietly but progressively as your children reduce their physical reliance upon you or their emotional reliance upon you. They'll always have a financial reliance to some extent, I've no doubt. You come to a point in life where they're adult, and they've essentially flown the nest, requiring a different form of care from you. And it seems time to reflect upon how well you've done in that job as a parent, and in that new context of being towards the later stages of your active career as well. It gives you pause for thought on what might lie ahead. I think it's an intangible thing in many ways, Chris. Tangible for some, I suspect, when their own financial circumstances might change. But midlife for me, I suppose, it's a span of time, probably 10 to 15 years in duration. No, probably no more. May continue on, but I sort of started to feel it only about 5 or 10 years ago. And I suspect it will continue for another 5 or 10 years yet. I certainly don't feel that midlife is a short phase in one's life. I think it spans a reasonable span of time, really.
That's really interesting. See, in there's something about your relationship with your children, there's relationship with work, there's about thinking forward, there's something on money. And for you said you started to feel it maybe 5 or 10 years ago. What were some of the early noticings or symptoms that you saw that made you think, oh, maybe I'm approaching this middle chapter?
I think that, the death of my father was a significant milestone. It triggered a realization in one's own mortality. And actually, as the eldest son of 3, I sort of felt compelled to take on a different status in relation to my mum, in relation to my brothers, our extended family. And I think that may well have been the moment where I went, actually, you're definitely a grown-up now, and you're probably quite a long way into being one. And you've got responsibilities towards others where you have no sense of obligation, but an absolute sense of care and responsibility for others. And at the same time, of course, my kids were at that point 10 or so years younger than they are now, and just making transitions into various stages of education. And it also coincided with my wife making a decision to return full-time to work. So quite a lot going on in that moment, but I think added up to a realization that there was a new phase of life commencing.
It's really interesting. My father passed about 3 years ago, and I'm the oldest of 3 as well. And similarly, just a realization of I'm not going to be here forever. Suddenly I can see that. It was 25 years older than me exactly. 25 years is one measure that could now lie out in front of me. Well, that's 22. And I'm very aware of those days going.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, he went a little early, but he was still a fairly elderly fella.
Mm.
But what was, I think, at the time most poignant for me, it coincided with me um, transitioning out of one big job and into another big job, and we talked about it, but he never saw it
Yeah.
conclude. And it certainly, from a sort of career perspective, it was an upwards move. I would have liked him to have been around for that because he was always a constant supporter, and in a very different mode to my mum, my wife, or all my kids, and all my friends. Even I mean, you have a different relationship with your dad, and given you only get one of them,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
quite unique, isn't it? So,
that's a that's a gift. I know it's something that when you talk about your children very fondly as well, it's one that you're hoping to play for them as well in terms of being their constant supporter and encourager.
that's an interesting thing in and of itself, Chris, because I know, like me, you've held some big and demanding roles, and at a time when your kids were little, you're putting an awful lot of energy and investment of time into work as well as life. I've always maintained I would, and I kind of would say this, wouldn't I? But I've always maintained that I would come into my own as a father later in their lives. Now,
Yeah.
maybe I was just making excuses for myself, right? But I think that probably is true. I'm probably a bit more valuable to them now as
Yeah.
a parent and guide than I was ever walking them to primary school or
Yeah.
taking them to football matches on a Sunday. Although I did do that too.
Gee, and that's a real gift just to reflect on that and to be able to say, look, there are different seasons in these relationships. And in
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
season,
yeah.
this midlife has something particular to offer in those relationships. And it's not necessarily too late if a season's gone, which we weren't particularly proud of in one of those. It's
I
here
mean, it,
now.
it, it definitely feels, I think, and again, for those in an equivalent sort of age group to me, they will probably recognize this when I say it feels like a crescendo in life. It gradually builds, but actually, when you add up in terms of coincidence in time, there's an awful lot going on. If you happen to be a parent, you happen to be on a career trajectory that is becoming more, not less demanding, when your experience in life expands through the responsibilities of parenting, all of that happening all at once. It makes just for actually a really interesting life, trying to juggle balance and prioritize effectively. I think you naturally learn to do a lot and get a lot
Yeah.
done, which in itself is a valuable experience to be applied in every different context within your life.
Have you got any practices that help you to stay well in this midlife with that crescendo of things going on and the different dimensions happening?
I think that there's the obvious stuff, Chris. Well, I mean, we are finite in physical terms, right? I mean, you've got to
Mm.
look after the physicality of your own existence, and I do that in a number of ways. I try to eat well. I don't drink much. When I do, I enjoy it. But I exercise regularly. I've always been a swimmer, and I love swimming regularly. I swim indoors and out. I've got a close friend of mine, and we regularly are seen jumping into a chalk stream in the Cotswolds with a constant temperature of 8 degrees C, just to shock us into realizing our lives are real. I walk a lot. I'm a walker. In fact, in the pandemic, I instituted walking and talking as a form of meeting, just so I could get out and about.
Yeah.
So I swapped my 2 hour commute in and out of London for a 2 hour walk, an hour each end of the day, and all of it was normally occupied either by listening to the birds or speaking to colleagues.
How did that change the quality of the conversations that you're able to have as well, being outside?
Yeah, no, I think it's a wonderful practice walking in whatever weather. You definitely experience a difference to sitting still while talking with people because your brain is alive to many other things whilst not actually being distracted by them, and it's quite healthy. That's on the physical side. On the more emotional side, well, swimming is my meditation. I mean, I can just go up and down and up and down, manage within a couple of lengths to have decluttered my brain, which is great. And I think the other thing I do, it's read. I don't really get on with fiction, but I read nonfiction, and I've got a bit of a pattern of reading history and history of the natural world, history of science, history of anything that can help. I think I'm searching for something really, something that informs me about human nature, because I've encountered thousands of human beings in my life, and I still don't really have a grasp on what makes them all tick, and particularly the origins of humanity. And the way that we've developed as animals and as civilizations and societies, and it all fascinates me, and I get quite a lot of both pleasure from it, but also relaxation from it, and it's informative to my understanding of people. I used to try actual meditation, and I just couldn't get on with it. I can turn my brain off when I'm doing something, but I can't turn my brain off when I'm not doing something. I'm very happy cycling down a road or swimming in a pool or walking on a mountain when I'm able to just clear all the clutter out and just be present. But I really struggled with the notion that I could just sit still and not think.
Yeah.
A mindfulness meditation was my chosen poison. It didn't really work.
I understand that. We had that lovely time just a week ago where standing behind the wheel of an old boat bobbing along, it is completely absorbing.
I am to say that will be ingrained on my memory forever, and you witnessed me in a meditative state, looking into the sunset at the helm of your beautiful old boat with the engine just thrumming away in the background. If you were talking to me, I didn't hear you.
I was, and you weren't. It was a wonder to watch, and it is completely absorbing. So thinking about your narrative then and how people become the people they are, if we look back through your career, you've had some interesting roles and interesting chapters. How do you think those different chapters have prepared you for midlife and for who and where you are now?
Yeah, I've had a really lucky run of really exciting jobs, Chris. I've gone towards challenges and tricky situations, and that's caused a lot of excitement and engagement from me. And whilst that's not for everyone, and it's not for the faint-hearted, I've actually developed as a human by facing into adversity, whether that was positively or negatively motivated adversity, by the way, but facing into adversity with others. And I think if there's one thing that I would draw from that whole experience of working in that mode, is that you're nothing without a team, and team prevails beyond any individual if you can craft from a group of people an ability to align upon some simple objectives and align upon the values and principles of working together to get the job done. And, the context has always been very different, but they've all had shared characteristics. There's always been a moment in my employer's history where something either isn't going very well or could definitely do with getting better. And they've kind of acknowledged it, but haven't worked out quite how to get after it. So I've always arrived when there's been a job to define, and then to do the job, building momentum with a group of, and normally with a relatively small group of people, but ultimately leading something significant for a very large group of people. I've worked in retail, and most of the organizations I've worked for have had multiple tens of thousands of people employed, but I've still enjoyed working with a relatively small team. I think fostering that sense of teamwork is in itself incredibly fulfilling. I think the second thing is organizations grow through the growth of the people within them. And being a lifelong learner in some respects myself, I'm also a lifelong teacher. And I gave up looking for tech leadership roles in industries some years back when I realized I was just putting myself into competition with people who I helped grow in their own careers, and I would be standing in the way of them. Why would I do that if I was sort of true to my own principles of helping grow people? Why would I want to reduce their opportunity to grow further, and particularly to grow further than me? And then thirdly, fun is an incredibly important aspect of work. And given we do so much of it relative to the time we have available to spend not working, you've got to make work fun. Whether it's really hard or not, if it's not fun, most people don't want to be involved.
Exactly. They vote with their feet.
There have been moments where, and I think people come to appreciate this about themselves, that you do have limits. You do have limits. And unless you test them, you don't know where they lie. And there have been occasions where, I've worked on and sometimes over my limits for too long. And the consequences of that haven't been particularly pleasant, really. It's a bit like motor racing, and you can drive a car only as fast as the physics will allow. And unless you figure that out, you might well put your foot down a little too hard at the wrong moment and spin a car out of a track. And that's, in life, it's kind of similar. You've got to push yourself. You don't have to, by the way, but it's a choice. But once you realize you do have them, finding them can be enlightening in one sense, but alarming in another.
Part of our hope for this midlife murmuration that we're shaping is the kind of wisdom and experience of others being passed to others in flight. So thinking about maybe the times you've had your foot down a bit too hard, what wisdom or thoughts or questions have you got that others might find helpful if they also see themselves going into the red?
I think that's a good way of describing it. I think if you were to think about, a green, amber and red status that you could appreciate in yourself. And there are many signs and many alerts that you can listen for, but it does take a level of self-awareness to know what to listen for in yourself. But we can't operate much beyond our amber zone for more than a few weeks, months at most, before it becomes really wearing. And certainly if you're in the red zone, days and small number of weeks is all it will take to push you into a tricky place, in my experience. Now, thankfully, I've only been there really in any significant sense twice in my life. And you certainly learn an awful lot through the first experience that you can apply to any subsequent occasions. And you do learn an awful lot about actually what to be mindful of in your own existence. I tend to lose sleep early in the mornings. I normally wake up pretty early anyway, but if it's anywhere before about 4:30, so that's a signal to me that my brain is just switched on because there's something that I didn't process out yesterday that I still need to attend to. And the minute you get multiple overlaying things that need your attention, your body will basically go, well, hang on a minute, mate, you need to get thinking. You've got work in 3 hours and you've got to get your shit together. So, just thinking about simple stuff like what time do you go to bed? What time do you wake up? How often you feel yourself compelled to get away from the work that you're doing. And I mean that during the sort of working day, if you just go, oh, I've got to, stop looking at the screen, stop speaking to people, the frequency of that, that internal sensation is also worth paying attention to. But, more than anything, one of the things that I've encouraged in others and in myself is that we all watch out for each other. And that we should all spend time to learn each other's signals.
Yeah.
And because quite often you're not noticing yourself, but you do a better job of noticing them in others. And, that's part of my teamwork philosophy, right, is that we all are humans first. Whether we are in the work context or not, we should be looking out for each other and making sure we're all okay. And when we're not okay, or when I'm noticing that you're not okay, that we all have permission to do something or say something.
I know you've touched on the impact you've had on others' careers who've been in your team, and that's something that continues to happen. And just now on that colleagueship dimension of looking out for each other, are there people who stand out who had a significant impact on the person that you've become?
There are several. Well, I mentioned my father earlier. He was a teacher. He was a physicist. He and I shared nothing in our lives in terms of the being. I mean, we were very similar people but we had no shared interest in music, particularly. I think that we might have come around to the idea that we liked driving fast cars. I would describe him as quite an arm's length, but that didn't mean he wasn't there, and it didn't mean that his wisdom wasn't shared. So he was definitely a big influence. And then I've had three folk that helped me along the way. I studied as engineering drawing in my school, and the teacher that ran the engineering drawing classes at school, unbelievable guy, really nurturing. He taught me both the art of and the science of drawing pictures. They helped me understand that you can break stuff apart and look at it in its various forms and how things need to fit together. And actually, I think it set me on the path in my later tech career towards architecture roles. And then the second guy is a guy called John Ryan, who was a lecturer at Manchester Poly, where I studied. I remember he looked at me and he said, you get this stuff and you can talk about it, write about it, but you're much more interested in how you apply technology, aren't you? The impact that it will have. You should focus on that because you're very good at getting your head around all the tech. But actually what you're also much better at is explaining why it's important and how it could be applied. And then finally, there's a fella who, he's very sadly passed away quite some while ago now, that guy called Stuart Crawford, who was my boss at Capgemini. And I'd sort of wandered around in my career before then. He set me on the path, right? In fact, in many ways, I would hold him directly responsible for the opportunities that subsequently came my way in terms of my career. And his teachings are widespread and wide felt by many, many people around the world. And I love him for it. In life more generally, I mean, there's been plenty of other people that have given me great joy and lots of critical feedback.
We all need it. We all need it. Tell me, as you've gone through these different roles and through these different chapters, how has your definition of success changed over time?
I think it always comes back to people at the outset of anything. It's fantastic to get a group of people to discuss, debate, argue, disagree, and then arrive at an alignment around what success really means for us in the context of that. So, and then working to achieve whatever outcome that might be. One of the things that I try to think about is that there's no singularity when it comes to success. Nothing exists in isolation. And if you're bothering to make an investment in your time and potentially money and the time of others to try and achieve some singular thing, you're kind of misguided. The opportunity of trying to achieve something should be also the achievement of many byproducts. And many byproducts come from a focus on a singular goal, but it's not in isolation. And I think for me, success is always about, well, how did that person feel as a consequence of being part of this journey? Yeah, I did quite a hard thing when I was at House Fraser, for example. I don't think I'd ever done so much in such a short period of time with so little money available to do it. But the team absolutely knew what we had to achieve. And all of them have subsequently taken that experience and used it to build their own careers in different ways. But we had a great deal of fun. And fun is an objective in and of itself. Success can't be measured in numerical terms in isolation. From a personal perspective, I wouldn't know how to define my own success, really. I would struggle to know whether I am or whether if I'm not, how to become. I just am, I just am. I do what I do. I enjoy doing it. I hope I'm quite good at it. People seem to keep telling me I am. But I wouldn't know how to define success. Yes, of course, money. Yes, of course, the materialities of it all. But that's not that's just doesn't do it for me. That peacefulness, Chris. peacefulness, that's success. Being with your friends, that's success. Having the opportunity to do things you enjoy as often as you have time to, that's
Yeah.
success. Making choices as to, how you spend your time rather than being a slave to others' expectations. These are all successful measures, aren't they?
I've been reflecting that, yeah, even choice is a privilege too, though, that we can't take it for granted. And I think just that awareness that that is privilege in and of itself and
Well,
comes
well
with
I mean,
a responsibility to,
one recent success, and it gives me huge satisfaction, and it's in a very sad context. A friend passed away a couple of weeks ago, as you know. Not It was actually younger than me, but he planted a tree in his garden when he moved to a house with his family, an apple tree, and it was overflowing with apples when I went round after he died. And I said to his wife, Claire, I'm gonna have those apples because John would have done something with them, and he's now not able to, so I'm going to do that. It's now bubbling away, making cider. The apple juice was nice, but the cider's going to be even better, and we're going to drink it together at Christmas. If that proves to be a good batch of cider, that's success. It's fine. I've been harbouring a desire to name something this for a long time. And it's going to get called wasted. All right, it's going to get called wasted because the apples were about to go to waste. John died very young and was a wasted talent as a result. So that's what I'm going to call it.
beautiful name. Hey, listen, measure of success you talk about as well, and just using that multi-dimensional measure of success. If we think about pension, investments, monies, what steps have you taken to align those choices with those values and success?
Yeah, I mean, I've recently moved out one fund manager to another that offers a bit more of an ethical and sustainable profile. So I did decant all of my various pension pots into that. And as you know, I'm an angel investor, so I've invested quite significantly over many years in numerous small startup businesses, with several aims in mind. One, to support businesses that have got purpose beyond profit in their principles, that are people-centered businesses and are sustainable by design. And I invest in those risks, not because necessarily they're going to become huge and successful, although of course I hope every one of them will. But actually to invest in the people who are growing them, all of whom are wonderful human beings in their own right, and have come up with ideas that have got real merit and applicability in the world that I occupy. And that it's quite diverse, and it's doing all right as a portfolio. It's doing okay. I mean, what I'd say for anybody listening that wants to consider startup investing, do your homework before you start spending actual money. It can be a bit racy at times and a bit riskier than you might imagine.
And for those who are thinking about it, what are some of the questions you've learned through your own experience to ask?
You have to have a very, very firm belief in the conviction of the founders. I've invested in a couple of dozen businesses. I've got investments through venture capital funds in lots of others. But the two failures that I've had in my portfolio, and I'm lucky to have only had two, have actually come down to the same thing. And that was a lack of conviction in the founders of the business that materialized once they'd taken investment. And you can't account for that. Do kind of circumstances change, or they might even change their mind. But, when you're investing in a business as early as I get involved, typically right at the beginning, you have to have a really solid belief in the conviction of the founders, and you have to lend them some of yourself to reinforce that conviction. I always think about it in terms of the 3 Cs when I look at a founder in the eye, right? Have they got courage? Have they got confidence? And have they got conviction? And they need all 3 in spades. And before I'm even starting to think about whether the idea's got merit, I'm judging the humans. Early stage investing is quite technical. You do need to understand how you get businesses formed, how you get funds raised, how you get teams built, how you get operational momentum, how you access markets, how it's quite technical. And when you're a founder and you're probably one or two people, or maybe three if you're lucky, who's setting this new venture up, it's very unlikely that you understand enough about what you're doing and what you're going to face along the way. And so I think there's another quality that I look for in founders, really, which is their willingness to ask for support and an acknowledgement of where their strengths and weaknesses and experience and lack of experience really lies. Because I meet so many founders who on the surface present a good pitch, even under questioning, present a good composition of personal praise. But then there's nothing worse than the overconfidence that comes when somebody sends them a large amount of money and they suddenly think they know it all. And there's a risk to that kind of reaction. I've only had two, and both of those occasions came down to ultimately a lack of conviction in the individuals involved. I think the other dimension for early stage investing is that you've got to go in ideally with others and who can bring something more than I can bring in the appraisal of the situation, and also bring their own ability to help amplify and accelerate the growth of these small companies. The failure rates are really high, generally and averagely overall. Not a great number of startups actually break through, but I've had a reasonable amount of success by having other people in my close proximity that will co-invest with me, and that brings the wisdom of the crowd to bear. It's one more thing. I've never sent money without a commitment from them that they also get my time. I don't just send money and not check in with them regularly and not read their investor updates. So you've got to be actively involved, because it's in your interest to be so.
And do you have a sense of what legacy you'd like to leave, Julian?
If you mean in financial terms, I don't think my kids are going to get much at the end, because I'm going to spend it all having fun. I was reflecting on this recently, and I sort of intrinsically wanted to. I want my immediate family to benefit from whatever I have created that wasn't there before me. But it isn't just my immediate family for whom a legacy is important. I do want people to feel that I've been positively influential to them too. We kind of, it's like pebble in the pond stuff, right? And we all are a pebble in our own ponds, but our ponds join up, right? And actually, I think the combination of, we've got a really close knit friendship group. All of our kids have grown up together. We often go on holiday together, massive big posse of people out on the slopes of the Austrian Alps. Be careful if you're ever in St. Anton in February. But or Studland, actually, Chris. Be careful.
Be careful in Studland. It's a beautiful place.
On Knoll Beach, mate. But I think there's something about the nurturing of each other that is a legacy in itself. And I've been very proud of what other kids in the group have achieved and what other grown-ups in the group have achieved, and would all see that to some extent as part of the legacy we might leave. Imparting knowledge, it must come back to some extent to the fact my dad was a teacher, and made his profession the imparting of knowledge to others and the support and nurturing of their growth. And I think that's probably it. The little business that I've got, I'll carry on, come what may, and one day that might end up being something that transcends my life. But if nothing else, there are, a few of the startups I've invested in that could end up going to some stellar heights of success. Let's see. I'm certainly not counting on that. I also, Chris, I don't enjoy doing it until I can really get into it. But I quite like gardening. and I wouldn't mind leaving
A nice garden.
the natural world around me in a better place than I
Yeah.
than I found it.
That little thing of everything you touch, leave it a little better than you find it,
Yeah.
leads me to clean shower heads when I go into a hotel room. And I think we can all make the world better, just little act by little act. And nobody might ever know, but we've just left it better than we found it.
Nobody knows.
So tell me about this little business you've started then, Julian.
Well, it's been going a while in my mind before it became a reality. Formed it in 2018. It was just a little vehicle for my own consulting and advisory work, forming into a more structured thing. It's called Quirkus. And at its heart is a collective of folk who have got similar length of experience, similar principles and values, similar aims and objectives to use their time and their money. Many are gone beyond that crescendo of career and realizing that they want a more flexible future, but still have an awful lot to give. And we give it in a number of ways. And we give it in time and advice through advisory work. We give it in investment capital into small businesses. Normally, as I said earlier, we wouldn't go in individually. We normally go in as a small group. Thirdly, we try and give back a little to the folk whose careers we may have influenced positively as well, and give them access to some of our wisdom and knowledge in a form we hope one day they might even pay for. I don't know, but it's also an organization that I'm starting to put into the hands of others and not just keep it all for myself. Partly because I don't have time, but actually you can't grow anything if you just hold it tightly. You've got to let it take its own course, and that is something that I hope it outlasts. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly some of the things that we've been doing have got the potential. And we made a very purposeful choice, actually, a couple of years ago to spend a reasonable chunk of our time working in not-for-profit organizations. We did some work with the Retail Trust, who look after the well-being of folk who work in and around the retail industry. And we've got about 3 million of those. And it's an industry that's perpetually challenged and it's quite stressful. We did some work with them to help build up a well-being index that allows retailers to compare and contrast their performance with their competitors when it comes to well-being in the workplace. And we're still doing a piece of work with another charity called New Life, who support the needs of disabled kids with specialist equipment. But they work very closely with the retail industry and turn overstock, which is donated to them, into funds to spend on equipment. Yeah, those are content. We do commercial work as well, but that's Quirkus, and it's growing. It's got momentum, and it's got some great folk involved. And yeah, I love it. Actually.
Super.
It's really nice to have.
And I know you're just about to make an unusual midlife pivot back into corporate life at the age of 56. What's led you to make that move now, Julian?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's three components to the decision to do it. One, I was asked. That's nice. We're right at the beginning of a very, really exciting era of technology disruption, right? And I've been lucky enough to live through 3 or 4 really big, transformative waves of technology disruption in my career so far. And AI presents both opportunity and threat at a grand scale. And I felt that I might miss it if I didn't get involved in an organization at the kind of scale that this one is and at the scale of the customers that they serve. I had this, hang on a minute, if I don't do this, I might miss this. It's like jumping on the wave. If you're not on it, you're on the beach watching it. And I didn't want to be on the beach. I wanted to be in the sea. There's always a financial dimension to it. But really, finally, it was about rejoining a group of people who I've worked with actually for the last 20 years in one capacity or other, and for whom, as individuals and as collective and as a company, I got really close alignment in terms of values and principles. Yeah, like these things, rarely by design, other than the sort of sensation that it's an organization that's maintained a consistency in the way it goes about doing business, and the individuals and the teams involved all have a very strong alignment to it, and that's great. I love the idea of this being not just a commercial organization, but being a purposeful organization, and one that's got a very significant culture that defines its difference, particularly when it comes to tech, because tech in itself, it can be all a bit raw and commercial and undifferentiated in that respect. And actually, I think culture is an incredibly important and long-lasting element of a business's ability to thrive.
Do you know what? I think it's quite exciting hearing you speak and reflecting back on that tutor from Manchester Poly, John,
Yeah,
who said it's about how you apply the technology, knowing now that X years on, you're going back to be in a role which will absolutely shape and influence the direction that technology goes in an organization that has the scale to make a difference, in that your learnings of
yeah.
people and relationships and the power of technology for good gets a chance to play out in what is a material role at material
Mm.
time.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Chris. I sort of oscillated between the technology industry and the consulting industry and the retail industry over the last 25 years, and I've worked on both sides of that relationship. I just felt an important moment to rejoin the side that can really amplify benefits available from this technology, whilst attending to all of the potential risks and harms uh, that are thrown up by this explosion of possibilities that AI is presenting us. And I did a piece of work some while back now, but I was asked to become an inaugural member of the Oxford Brookes University Institute of Ethical AI. And that is quite attractive as well, that companies need guidance to navigate this new era. And I'd like to think I had some qualities and experience that might help in that respect too.
Super. And look, I've also get to witness it as a daughter's about to go to university next weekend. She's got ADHD and she's been given an amazing portfolio of software that's powered by AI that will help her
Mm.
level the playing field and make the most of the opportunity that she has. And I know there's a huge opportunity for these
Yeah.
technologies to improve accessibility and inclusion and
Yeah,
level the
amazing.
playing field.
It is amazing. And I've been a huge advocate for technology in support of people with disabilities of all kinds. The assistive power of technology and the ability to adapt to people's differences is incredible. And it's been a long held passion for me to make sure that technology is used in that sense, in ethical and inclusive ways, and not inadvertently exclude people, particularly those that might have physical or mental differences that can cause them to be disadvantaged at work or in life.
I'm sure your father, the teacher, would be cheering you on, Julian, and super proud of the game you're playing. It sounds great. I've got one final question for you. As we now think back maybe to Julian as he started to have those inklings of midlife 10 years ago, what truth would you whisper to him to help him navigate through this period?
I mean, I say this to myself a lot anyway, and I think I started to say it to myself then. And it really just is an attempt to knowingly react to the stresses and strains of life. And I just simply, it's not a mantra or anything, but I do often find myself inside as saying, just roll with it. Just roll with it. Because nothing lasts forever, right? Moments of high stress and anxiety, moments of high excitement, they come and go. So you just roll with it. I was talking to Claire, the wife of my friend who died a couple of weeks ago. And I said to Claire, you have no experience of grief other than the experience you're about to have, right? You never lost a husband before. And this is going to feel like you've just been thrown, headfirst into a deep, dark, stormy sea. with the wind and the rain battering you. But I said, just roll with it. Be a cork. Be a cork. You won't sink. Just roll with it. And then the sun will come out one day. Might go in again. The waves might settle down. The wind might drop. It might rise. But at the end of the day, you'll float through this grief and arrive on a beach one day. Won't be that long. So just roll with it. Hopefully, she'll invite me round for Christmas to share cider, or may have heard what I just said and thought, weirdo.
She might. And get wasted. Super. That's been really, really lovely. Thank you, Julian. Now, tell me, how can people find out more or get in touch with legend that is Mr. Julian Burnett?
Oh, just reach out on LinkedIn, Chris. I wouldn't want anybody to visit any website that was associated with me. And that's not a comment about OnlyFans.
Super. What a great conversation. Thank you, Julian. Thank you for adding to our midlife murmuration, your murmurings. It's been a joy, and wish you all the best in the new role as well.
Thank you, Chris, for the opportunity. I'll see you soon, no doubt.
You will.